Our next speaker will be Ms. Irena Kraja. Her first degree is in psychology. She holds a Master of Arts in Counseling and is specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy. She has been employed over the past 9 years in the Mary Ward Loreto Albania projects, working with women and girls in rural areas of Albania. Since 2016, she is the coordinator of Mary Ward Loreto's Women Advice Service Center of Tirana, ASC. During her work, she develops the initial identification of presumed victims of trafficking and victims of trafficking at the Women's Advice and Service Center, and works throughout their reintegration programs. She develops psychological counseling and therapy sessions with women and young adults. She assists with the Albanian victims in the shelters of Medai Trust in United Kingdom through online assessment and counseling, and when possible, directly in the safe houses. She is also providing psychological evidence to support the process of asylum-seeking applications. Irena, you have the floor.
Thank you, Miriam. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here for the second time and to share again my experiences, but now in a different light. So I'm going to talk today about trafficking and trauma, and more specific in intercultural approach. As Miriam introduced me, I work for Mary Ward Loreto in Albania, and the experience that I'm sharing today is the experience gained in this foundation, gained working directly with survivors of human trafficking in our advice and service center, but as well as working in collaboration with Medai Trust in UK and providing online counseling for Albanian survivors in UK. So, what is human trafficking? I don't intend now to do a training about human trafficking, but we know it is a serious crime and a grave violation of human rights. It includes act, recruitment, transfer, harboring, receipt of person, through threats, using force, coercion, abduction, abuse, or of power, or vulnerability, or giving payments and benefits. The purpose is for exploitation, including prostitution, including sexual exploitation, forced labor, slavery, or similar practices, other types of exploitation, removal of organs. So when we ask what is human trafficking, this is the technical explanation. And this helps us to know how to identify a human trafficking situation. But we have to know as well, how does human trafficking feel? And when we ask survivors, they are not able to give a definition of what it is and how it feels, but they can explain through some words like terror, prison, feeling guilty, feeling lost, feeling dead. I wouldn't wish it even to my worst enemy. Feeling like a product in the market, I'm worthless, I hate myself, I'm broken, nothing helps, and many other words that explain how like the horror of human trafficking. What should we know about survivors? First of all, we should know that we have victims and survivors, and that there is no single profile of a victim of trafficking. They can be any race, they can be from any country, can be from any culture, any economic situation, but we know that traffickers have some, let's say, they know where they can pick a victim of trafficking. They know what are the characteristics that makes them vulnerable. We need to know as well that human traffickers are survivors of trafficking, but as well as survivors of trauma. So these two cannot be separated. Survivors might have previous traumas as well, not just trafficking trauma. The rhythm of overcoming trauma varies from one person to another. They need their time. Healing feels like a messy process and feels like it's quite impossible. As much as we want for them to heal as soon as they can, it's not up to our will. We can help it to proceed the time, but it doesn't happen just because we have a fixed program. For example, 6 months of healing from trauma. They might not be immediately compliable with shelter regulations. They might not trust people that try to help them. We need to know as well that the children of survivors of human trafficking can be affected of the trauma of their parents. When their parents didn't overcome the trauma or the anxiety and fears, then the children learn, gain some learning behaviors and some learning coping mechanisms. They hold a belief system, which is important to be understood, and they hold a social and cultural background. But the way the brain processes memory is the same in any culture, is the same in any country. When we face a normal event, how does the brain process events? It goes to working memory. So the normal event, the stimuli, is processed in working memory and then in long-term memory. When we face traumatic events, it bypasses working memory and goes directly to long-term memory. And that's why trauma feels, and this leads to post-trauma, and that's why it feels like it's not easy to overcome it because of the thoughts, the feelings have not been processed. There are some misconceptions about post-traumatic stress disorders, which seems like these are in all cultures. It depends whether the survivors know that they are going through PTSD or not, but about the way they feel, they create these misconceptions, like time heals the wounds. This is not true. Time doesn't heal, it takes time to heal. It is impossible for me to heal, nothing works. This is as well a misconception. Although they feel like nothing works, it doesn't mean that it will not work. If I avoid talking about trauma, I will forget about it. As well a misconception. I will never have a normal life, or I am completely broken. This is not true. It feels like, but no, we need to tell them and we have to show them, maybe not in therapy, because saying them, no, you survived, you will do it. It's not really the best therapeutical way, but we need to show them that, no, you survived. And one person can fully recover from PTSD. It takes to build a mindset and it takes to build a life after trafficking. We can help them to build the mindset through different ways. We can help them build a life after trafficking, and how do we do that? First of all, we have to care. In our work, we should show caring and considering work as a mission, being dedicated, believing and caring human values, respect diversity, being trained constantly, and being authentic. What our clients can do best is recognizing when we are authentic or when we are not. So if we show these aspects in our work, we can feel that missing piece of the puzzle. Trauma-informed approach or trauma-informed care means understanding the physical, the social, emotional impact of trauma on the individual as well as on professionals who help them. So both parts are very important. This provides protection and decreased vulnerability. So first of all, it's important to provide safety, and then help them feel safe. Because we can provide physical safety, but do they feel safe? Then is trustworthiness. It's important to build trust, let them have the choice. Then is collaboration and empowerment. Being culturally sensitive and or intercultural approach is very important. In the shelters, there are not survivors from the same country or from the same culture. And when I mean intercultural, I don't only mean from one country to another, but as well within a country from one area to another, which may differ in culture or social norms. The first difference is language, even the way how people say hello. And when they are all in a house with different languages and not knowing the language that is used in the shelter where they are, it's the first barrier. Everybody who comes from different cultures, they carry with them their rituals, the tone of voice, body language, the way of dressing, spiritualities, food, coping with emotional distress. Sometimes it is learned in the culture. Shame, how they deal with shame and guilt, inferiority versus superiority, how they handle rejection, rewards, and punishment. Why is important being culturally sensitive? Because it recognizes the importance of race, culture, beliefs, values, attitudes, religions, language in the life of the client. If we take, for example, rituals and religions, working with the Albanian survivors that are sheltered in UK, they carried the rituals from Albania there. For example, starting from everyday rituals, doing housework, cleaning, and this is very important for them, for let's say one culture. If other girls in the house do not have the same daily rituals, there is a clash between them, and this can bring some insecurities, because we do some rituals because we feel safe by doing this. And when we are not surrounded by the same, we can feel a bit more insecure. Tone of voice. Some cultures speak loudly, some others speak with a low tone of voice. And for example, for a survivor, speaking loudly might be perceived as abusing and might remind of traumas that she has been going through. Let's say even food that is used in different countries doesn't smell the same, and who is not used with a kind of food, even this can be a problem in the shelter. The way of dressing, how superiority and inferiority, which we know it's always like our war. We don't want to feel inferior, we want to feel superior. How do we show it? And imagine in a shelter, let's say with at least 10 survivors who are going through this inferiority and superiority, how this can impact each other. How they handle rejection. For example, no doesn't have the same meaning in every culture. Saying no to Albanian survivors in UK is like is perceived by them like don't ask me again, or you asked me the wrong question. Maybe saying to somebody that comes from another country means like no means maybe. No, you have to ask again. Rewards and punishments. It is as well cultural. Maybe even saying no can feel like a punishment. Sometimes they think that I ask for something, it is a no, because yesterday I didn't do this. So how we relate actual situations with our belief system and with our way that we are used in a culture to interpret situations is very important to be understood. But we have to remember that trafficking, violence is not cultural. Sexual assault is not cultural. Abuse, stealing is not cultural. We respect diversity, but this is global. While working with survivors, it's important to train them to accept diversity. It's important to train them to communicate in a way that doesn't feel other nationalities feel like they are being attacked, or for example racism. If we ask people, many of them will say I'm not racist, but while talking, while doing things, it can be perceived as a racism for somebody. And as well, it's important for survivors living together to understand that abuse is not cultural and it cannot be tolerated. This helps them to have a better understanding of what they have been going through, but as well a better understanding of how they interact with each other. And if abuse is perceived within a shelter, this might lead to re-traumatization or to keeping trauma alive, and makes that the process of recovery goes very low. How can, these are only a few points of case management for clients from different countries and cultures. Is important, provide safety and help them feel safe, protect the best interest of survivors in your country. If we speak in a political way, sometimes survivors can be reintegrated in the country where they are rescued, or they can be deported to their country and go with the process there. But first, it's important to protect the best interest in the country where these survivors are rescued. To be very careful while applying interviews, using interpreters, or as well asking the survivors whether they are ready to handle it. Many interviews, time after time, can keep trauma alive. And it happens that while they give interviews, they are not able to give the whole information, or sometimes the information they give doesn't match with what they have given before, because due to trauma, they forget many elements of their story. Conflict management inside the shelter is very important. provide the best support for asylum seeking, provide communication services in native language, and work in international network. I want to mention some specifics about my work with Albanian survivors in UK. They are, let's say, many of them don't know that they are survivors. They are victims. Or they don't accept that they are survivors because they don't believe that they survived and that they can make it. It is the trauma trafficking what has caused them this feeling hopeless and feeling depressed. But it's not just trafficking trauma, it's their whole life story. Maybe before they didn't know that they have been abused, but now that they live in a shelter, that they are being treated with respect and consideration, now they are thinking about the way they have been treated before. For example, a girl who comes from a rural area, who has lived in a patriarchal family, who has been raised believing that women and girls are properties, that domestic violence against them is normal. They thought that this is okay. After they have been trafficked from a lover boy or even from a family member, they felt injustice, betrayal, and abused. Maybe for the first time they felt abused, because that is something that they didn't expect. They did expect domestic violence in the family, but didn't expect trafficking. After they have been rescued, they suffered trafficking trauma, but as well thinking about what they have been going through in their childhood, or maybe even later, they have another trauma, and this leads to complex post-traumatic stress disorder. What is interesting is that many of the survivors first want to deal with trauma of domestic violence. It can be seen as a way to avoid facing trauma of trafficking, but it can be seen as well as a way going to the root of the problem, seeing that trafficking is not my real problem. My real problem is my family. Where have I been raised? Is my society, my culture, feeling abandoned, being abandoned. And then they want to work with trauma of trafficking. Before I go to thank you, what is important for us to understand here? If we work with them on trauma without them being ready, we risk to open a scar that they are not ready to work on it. Sometimes counseling, when we develop counseling, sometimes I don't ask them, what's your story? They can tell me their story. They can take their time to tell me their story. They can take their time to believe me, to have trust in me. And when they are ready, we work on trauma. Many of them do attend as well group therapy in UK, self-help groups, attend some private sessions, counseling, but talking in another language is difficult for them. It is very important, it's crucial, the communication, the words, and the ability to express themselves. but as well the ability to understand what somebody else is telling to them. Even when there is an interpreter, they feel like the connection is between them, the interpreter, and the psychologist. So not them and psychologists. And I've noticed in sometimes that the better connection they have is with the interpreter. So they speak more about the interpreter, like she's good, he's a good person, he is very generous, he treats me very well, the way she speaks, and less times about the psychologist, which is understandable because the communication is not direct, because there is this language barrier. In cases when the therapy is directly in PTSD, working with PTSD, some of them might leave therapy, or they go to therapy just because they are sad. So they are advised, they have been advised to attend therapy, but they don't feel ready for it. They haven't built their mindset yet for that. And sometimes it's okay if we give them time and we all work as a multidisciplinary group to help them build a mindset and believe in the future. But as well as giving them this awareness that although facing the trauma is very difficult, it's better facing it now than facing it for the rest of the life. Any kind of therapy, any kind of psychological work works. It's counseling, it can be cognitive behavioral therapy, art therapy, it can be meditation, any spiritual activity that they might attend. Sports can be as well. So we cannot say which therapy is the right one. We usually use personalized, individualized techniques for any of our clients. So I cannot say which one is the best. The best is the one who works. And I would thank you for your attention, and I'm glad to answer any question when it's the right time.
Thank you so much, Irena, for your deep respect, for your empathy and compassion you have for survivors of trafficking, but also for still victims of trafficking, and trying to help them to be not a victim anymore, but a survivor. Now we have some questions, and I think I will give some to give you the possibility maybe to share what you want to speak about. So there was a discussion about dissociative identity disorder, what is related to post-traumatic disorder, but even deeper and related to childhood trauma. And maybe you can elaborate on this a little bit more if possible, but I think it's going very deep. Then there is a question about what are the major challenges for each of the speakers after all these years working with enslaved people, survivors of human trafficking. And have you noticed specific trauma symptoms among victims of trafficking, other than trauma symptoms in general? That means other specific symptoms for trauma in general. It's asked by Dr. Zeina Chemali, a psychologist at the Comité contre l'esclavage moderne in Paris. So the three ideas is first the dissociative identity disorder, then the major challenges of each of you, and specific trauma symptoms among victims of trafficking. So just if you feel to answer to one or two of them, you can take the floor. I don't know if somebody of you wants to start. Irena? Or yeah.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to say that it's a good point. So the commenter made a good point on did, because complex trauma, childhood traumas do lead to personality disorders, but not all the time. And when it can lead to dissociative personality disorder, it can lead to borderline personality disorder, bipolar, it can many from the disorders. But as long as I am not expert in diagnostification of disorders, but I can say that whatever the disorder is, when we work with clients, we see the issues they bring, we see what they need to work on more than what a disorder it is. Of course, knowing the disorders, knowing the way of treatment, and knowing the specific symptoms, how to treat, the techniques are very important. But at the end, since we work with the issues and how to help them, especially when we work in the shelters, we are not all psychologists. I'm a psychologist, and I can say that I'm not an expert in the diagnostification. So other co-workers that are not in this field, for us it's important to see the pain, the trauma, the consequences that it has led. But I think that it's a very good point, because it's important to talk about mental health issues as consequences of childhood trauma, as well as personality disorder or psychotic disorders that can come as a consequence.
Thank you a lot. We got another new question, what I think is very interesting. Does hope play a role in recovery? If so, how, especially for some who can still connect with God and or their religious traditions, where hope is something that goes beyond this life, or perhaps a sense of being abandoned by God or a higher power undermines such a sense of hope? Can you say something?
Yes. The question about does hope play a role in recovery? It does play a very important role, hoping and believing. It's the belief system, how we build the mindset and how we work through it. The commenter mentioned feeling a sense of being abandoned by God or a higher power undermines such a sense of hope. So it is a sense of abandonment. Abandonment is one of the issues that lead us to feeling not just hopeless, feeling lonely, and at the same time feeling incapable of doing things, and being abandoned, feeling abandoned by God. For people who believe and they have a strong belief in God, is like it's the biggest loss that they can perceive they have. But it is important as well to understand that how we believe that things happen, whether things happened to us or things happened for us. When we are at this mindset that things happened to us, it is more probable to stay in the victim mode. When things happened for us, we build more hope, believe in a recovery, and get out of a victim mode and heal and change the life and perspective of how we see things.
Thank you. Very comprehensive answer. So I know that our time is going to end, but there's a very interesting question also. Are there any international communities of practice for mental health professionals in anti-trafficking work? Also, any international networks for shelters and psychosocial programs to share good practice, challenge solidarity? Do you know about it? Irena, you are looking, yeah.
I was looking actually at the question, have you noticed specific trauma symptoms among victims of trafficking? I've noticed that except flashbacks, unwanted memories, and nightmares, and anxiety, panic attacks, there are some hallucinations as well. And which I mentioned, safety is important, but now I'm doing an interpretation of what this might be, because safety is very important, but trauma, although the event is not present anymore, the fear is present. The object of fear is not present anymore, but the mind creates an object of fear. And I've noticed that some of them during the night do see ghosts, things moving in the house, because it is a perceived threat. They know that there is not any realistic threat in the house, but due to fear, the brain produces some visions that are not real, that reinforce the fear that they have. So hallucinations have been present, not in terms of having an impact on the mental clarity, although many of them know that I had, or they can say that I had a hallucination. So it's not an it's not an indication of losing mental health, mental clarity. Yeah, but this is one specific that I've noticed.
Thank you very much for answering these various different questions. So comprehensive, and thank you for the wonderful presentations. We have a lot of positive echo also in the chat about the people who attended from all over the world. So thanks to the panelists for this interesting webinar.